Good afternoon. We're at 4 o'clock. Our clock in the back wall is a couple minutes slow. So first off, I just want to acknowledge we're on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, especially our friends in the Qualcomm Nation. First order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes or amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted by consent. 1 point for the public before we start talking to folks is that as we have had a public hearing on Eagle Crest, there can be no discussion anything related to the Eagle Crest rezoning. So please don't bring that up. Otherwise, we're going to have a very awkward moment as a council. And with that, just to Ms. Lurenberg, were there any signups, or should we just let folks go as they see fit? I think we just let folks stand up. So if anyone wants to come to the microphone in the front to address issues relating to public safety, please do so. And just for the benefit of everyone, if you come to the microphone, just state your name and community of residence, please.
Oh, it goes green automatically. Tim Pritchard, Qualicum Beach. Maybe just a clarification here. Though the answer, preparing for this on a discussion of public safety, I said, oh yeah, I remember. I haven't looked at it for a while, but there's a public safety committee. I'll go looking for that. So I looked this all over the website, couldn't find anything. Then I found an amendment to a committee that was public safety in January 2023. And I said, oh, okay, there it is. Maybe I'll search some more. And then I found another amendment to the terms of reference in February of 2025, and all mention of public safety had gone away. So, and I looked through all of the assignments of council members, and nobody was assigned to anything that had to do with public safety. There was mention of public safety being covered at one of the airport sessions. So here we are, we're having a committee of the whole. It's not related to a safety committee, although it has been sort of moved, I guess is the word, to the community transportation plan. But that really doesn't function like a committee. So suggest unless there's things like this, there's limited opportunities for public input. So that's, I was looking for a clarification, and I guess I stumbled into it. That's all.
Ms. Farrell?
Thank you, Chair. So through you to Mr. Pritchard. So council decision-making was to disband the Public Safety Committee, and the corporate officer is just looking for that resolution and the year for us. And that was replaced with an annual committee of the whole, such as today's, which is just an open agenda for any item that the public may want to discuss with council in the context of public safety. The community transportation plan was being done sporadically, sometimes 2-3 years. Council has directed staff. We now hold those meetings once a year. And then the airport is held twice a year. So really moving from that committee structure to a committee of the whole structure as council deems appropriate. So thank you. I hope that helps.
Okay. Well, if I may, just if we look behind us of how many members of the public are here, it says something. So at the appropriate time, council may want to just consider how it's handling the whole subject of public safety. If we have a problem, maybe we just don't have problems. So maybe that's the answer. But may I cover cover an item, please? Actually, I've been asked by a number of residents of the East Village to comment on a situation that they think is an unhealthy traffic situation on Fern Road East. And they've observed repeatedly over the summer months that both pedestrians and vehicular traffic has increased in the area of the East Village as it's moved forward. These residents, and some of them are new, have been hesitant to come forward to the Committee of the Whole session. Actually, they told me that they were intimidated to speak before council. I've told them that they shouldn't be concerned and that council won't bite, or at least not most of them. I say that just to try and put things in some perspective. Over the summer, these residents have observed and heard excessive speeding along Fern Road east of Memorial. Once some vehicles pass Lordco, the speed picks up. Often they are in pickup trucks or vehicles with no mufflers, and it almost seemed to be using Fern East as some sort of a speedway. This tends to happen late in the afternoon and the early evening, and more so on Friday and Saturdays. They not only find this annoying but dangerous, and the limited enforcement continues. So, what is the situation, and what does the statistics say? The latest Community Transportation Plan report in September this year listed ICB reported crashes at 46 intersections. On page 20, it shows Fern East and Fern West and Memorial as having the highest 5-year incidence of any considerable, by a considerable margin. Now we know that this isn't all speed related, and when we look at the speed data for the transportation plan on page 18, it shows speed data related to Fern Road. Although the speeds recorded on Fern are not high, the report notes that there were battery issues with the counter at the location, so the numbers may not be accurate. So it's clear that there are problems. However, these residents think that the problems can be addressed quite easily by the town at low cost, and they have several suggestions. First and most importantly, install a four-way stop signage at the intersection of Berwick and Fern, like already exists at Primrose and the beach intersections on Fern Road. So there would be conformity in all the intersections on Fern. Also, the signage could be enhanced by including painted crosswalk markings to provide increased pedestrian crossings, more assurance when crossing. This would all provide increased public safety at low cost and reduce the need and also the cost of having more enforcement for this important stretch of town roadway. Furthermore, it is possible the Public Works Department, which is located right at this intersection, may already have the other two signs in its inventory, and they could probably be installed quite easily. So, thank you. If there's another opportunity, I wouldn't mind coming back again. Thank you.
Sure, and just to add to that too, we did also, for the first issue about the Public Safety Committee, there was a report on committees being restructured in a previous council meeting roughly 2 years ago, and there was a presentation at council on that. And the Public Safety Committee was the first step, and there are some other committees being looked at in due course, but we, between the provincial legislation and everything else going on these days, I think staff have a very full dance card, so I don't know the timelines for that. For the East Village, there is ICBC data you can access online, which you can divide up into accidents that have injury and just accidents in general. Right now, the majority of accidents happen at Fern and Memorial, and there's been some really nasty ones, but the point is well taken that as we have more density now around East Village, that Berwick and Fern intersection is something we might have to look at. And just, if I may, I don't know if it'd be Ms. Varela or, I think Ms. Varela, probably. So we did have the data in our transportation plan about speed, so we actually have equipment that can monitor speeds on certain roads, and that's more operational, so I don't want to direct staff on operational matters. But if there is something where several citizens, say in the East Village, think that might be something the town can monitor, that might be something we could do. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Chair. So we will provide that information to operations staff. I'm not sure where those reader boards are currently stationed or what the proposed schedule is, but we will definitely flag that for staff. And additionally, council decision-making about the Public Safety Committee was on May 29th, 2024. Thank you.
Thanks. And now we have a date too for folks at home who want to look that up on the internet. So with that, is there anyone else who'd like to come to the microphone? Round two, Mr. Pritchard. Come on up.
There you go. Okay. On a slightly different subject, but not that. At the last town hall meeting, I commented on the community transportation plan and how it had evolved since its inception in 2013. I noted at the time that the original age-friendly transportation plan was originally funded by a sizable grant focused primarily on pedestrian issues related to an aging population, and hence the name. The initial 2013 report identified 44 improvement projects important to the town, for the town to address. Over the ensuing 12 years, there have been 4 or 5 updates reporting completed projects and adding newly identified projects. This has led to many important pedestrian, road, and safety projects being undertaken. New projects have been identified and documented by the town engineering department in coordination with the town's traffic consultant, Richard Druhl. All newly identified projects have been prioritized using the 6 criteria ranking system outlined in the community transportation plan. The last plan update was presented September 25. At this time, summary showed 5 RRFPs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, having been installed so far, plus an additional 4 flashing light crossings. These represented 20% of all completed projects and the lower cost ones. When the AFTP started, the initial projects approved and undertaken were for flashing light crossings. A number of these projects were largely funded by ICBC year-end grants, which required minimal town expenditures. At the time, these projects were described as the low-hanging fruit, recognizing that there was still a lot to be done. Now fast forward to today, and where do things stand? In the latest CTP update, dated September 2025, it shows 58 projects identified still to be undertaken. Funding for these projects, some of these projects is included in the financial plan. If we look at the specifics of the 58 projects, we can see that the project funding listing includes 13 additional RRFP projects at various street crossings and intersections. This is again over 20% of all identified projects. Of note, this does not include the recent RRFP signaling installation at Memorial and First intersection to address the problems at the railway crossing. Excuse me. Oop. Stuck together. Sorry. Okay, now here's the point and the question. Traffic control RRFP projects have been identified as important traffic control and pedestrian safety measures to be undertaken, but there's still a lot more work to be done, as you can see by the projects on the current list. They are relatively low cost, between $25,000 and $100,000 under the criteria and often qualify for grant funding, and of course they may save lives. So the question is, what steps can be taken to advance the 13 identified RRFP projects to the installation stage sooner than later? So that's a question I think needs to be addressed, how they can be advanced. So now to part two of this situation, and it's actually happening on the ground. I happen to drive through 2 of the 5 current RRFPs once or twice most days. One on Qualicum Road, just north of the railway tracks, where the Dollymont Trail crosses Qualicum Road, and the other at the corner of Village Way and Qualicum Road. What I've noticed and observed repeatedly, particularly at the Qualicum Road Dollymont Trail crossing, which is quite busy, is that approximately, I'd say, a quarter of all of those on foot or on a bicycle of one type or another don't activate the RRFP signal. They may pause or just cross, which makes things very hard for drivers. What's needed is some more enforcement, or at least some safety education. If the town is going to invest in safety measures, then the public should follow basic safety considerations, or these are not effective investments. It would be good to have the town assess the situation and determine what can be done in regard to public education on this. This circles back to whatever has happened. There's going to be a committee dealing with public safety issues in some way or another. And I'd just like to leave it that for further consideration at some time by council. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Chair. Could we kindly request that those comments are submitted in writing, and we'll make sure that those are referred to both staff and the traffic engineer consultant. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that's quite reasonable. Also, too, if folks, as we're going into budget, if you want to see budget allocated to certain types of projects, that's also a really useful feedback over the next few months, because we're getting very close to the day where we start that process. And I'm really sorry, I neglected one thing. I didn't check over my shoulders as well as I should have to either of my colleagues. No questions for Mr. Pritchard? Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure about that. Thanks. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to come to the microphone?
I decided I'd like to say something.
Come on up, Marlis. And while I'm sure that our staff are capable, if you could just state your name for the record.
Marlis Diamond, Qualicum Beach. I wanted to compliment, I guess, the staff and the people that followed some of the suggestions I've made on safety already. That is specifically connected with the horrendous jaywalking that we experience every Saturday when the market is on. And I made suggestions that they absolutely enlarge the markings on the road in front of those 2 boxes. I don't know what those 2 boxes are, but people had been disregarding the previous signage and made it so that their cars were sticking out into the traffic lane, so anybody that just wanted to go straight had to veer off and go into the other lane. So that was a big improvement. And the other thing was that there was a single parking space between the lane and the co-op service station, and that also made a problem because people that were planning to turn right would do the roundabout. So anyway, that was removed, so I felt pretty gratified that some attention was being paid. And the other thing that a couple of other things. One is I had suggested that as time goes on, it might be possible to move the area where the Saturday market is held to the East Village, that sort of wiggly road that I know it's not really intended for that, but I think that a half a day a week wouldn't be a big inconvenience, that the people that actually lived in that area couldn't be too inconvenience. That would free up all of the area between Memorial and the Legion for parking, which would really help a lot. So the other thing that I think I have mentioned, although maybe not, was a desire to have a reduced speed limit in the town, 30 km an hour. I know that at the time it was discussed previously, it was said that you had to go to a great deal of expense to get signage all over the place. But I'm not sure that's entirely true, or maybe it's been modified, because I know that at least one of the major municipalities on the mainland is doing that. And I think that it may have already been touched upon that the people that come down in either direction on Memorial, whether it's up from the beach, which is tricky because it's a hidden area and also on a hill, or they come in from the roundabout at Rupert Road, you know, the cars are just, they just think that they can run down anybody. I guess that may be what they have in mind. But it's really very noticeable. And I think that one of the things that Qualicum Beach has not had a lot of is residential sidewalks. And there are people in the in our downtown area who live in this, they're made to go in between cars to get out onto the street so they can walk. And this is really difficult. I'm not sure what can be done about that, but if you think about the idea of putting sidewalks all over town, that's a horrendous expense. So, you know, maybe the easier way would be to do some mitigation on the speed that people, you know, go down all of our streets, so that those that do have to go out to bypass cars parked in front of their area don't feel so endangered. I think that's something that's really worth looking at, because I think that the idea of putting sidewalks in all of the communities in Qualicum Beach would be unthinkable expense-wise. And so I would also like to mention the difficulty now that there's so many electric vehicles, whether it's skateboards, segways, or electric wheelchairs, you name it, we've got a lot of it. And there is no real distinction on where these vehicles should be. And I believe that the motorized vehicles, I guess you call them wheelchairs, that's not the right word, but you know, the kind of thing that people use, that they are actually sidewalk vehicles. Well, sometimes it can be pretty scary, because those drivers aren't always the best either. And when it comes to the skateboards and other motorized vehicles, sometimes it's younger people that are filled with enthusiasm, and you know, they just really go. And I think that there's a need for having some distinction on which vehicle goes where. You know, all of those motorized vehicles in theory seem to be okay on the sidewalk, but we don't want cars on the sidewalks. So there has to be some distinction, I think, in how this is going to work. And it's kind of a long-range thing, but I think that people of the town need to start thinking about that, so that there isn't a big protest that, you know, they're not getting what they want, because I don't think it's even thinkable that the budget could ever include sidewalks in the residential areas of town. And this is really a major safety issue. So anyway, I thought that I wanted to compliment staff on doing some of the things that I suggested, and offer a few challenges for the future. Thank you.
I'd also like to thank our secret overlord, Marlis Diamond, for telling us what to do. But those are some actually good improvements. Just before I start in, is there anything from other members of council on what Marlis said? Was there anything from staff about what she said about maybe like residential sidewalks or anything else? I didn't really, I think Ms. Diamond actually picked up on the fact that, yes, it is very expensive to do residential sidewalks. And in certain parts of town, you have people who create ersatz walking paths. So for example, on Memorial, a lot of the patio home development north of Qualicum Commons or above Qualicum Commons, they don't walk along Memorial, they walk along the side street behind all the single-family homes because of the unevenness of the concrete going up and down for some of the older seniors. And as we're doing more residential infill, our OCP calls for densification of the village neighborhood. Ideally, you will see more pedestrians, and then we're going to have more electric bikes, more pedestrians, and we have the same problem a lot of communities have where some of our roads were sort of set up 50, 80 years ago for a car and a parked car and not much else. And then we're going to have bicycles, EVs, possibly parking as well, possibly a motor vehicle. So it is a good point that we should be thinking about how do all these different forms of transportation interact and how do they do so in a way that's safe. Because we did some excellent work on the waterfront for the Old Island Highway, but part of the genesis of that was someone getting their, I think it was their arm was broken when a bicyclist was coming on very quickly, and they weren't sure where the bicyclist was going, and they ran into each other. And there's a pedestrian, I think it was a broken arm, or it was either a broken arm or a broken collarbone, but someone's hurt quite badly. So we'd like to avoid that in our downtown if we can. And I know our staff do a good job of planning, and there's a lot of work to do on that file. So, I mean, it's so vast, I can't really say too much. Only other thing, too, is that just to Mr. Pritchard's earlier point, if you don't turn on the flasher, it's still legally a crosswalk, but to your point, it's less visible to the drivers, and there might be a safety-related impact, but there is still an onus on the driver to stop if someone's crossing a crosswalk with no lights on. And beyond that, I don't think there's anything else. Is there anyone? Oh, Mr. Pritchard, round 3.
You'll never say that again. Tim Pritchard, I'd like to pick up on something that was said just a while ago and refer back to, I think it was the last town hall when I think it was Todd Provo from Qualicum Woods who spoke about reducing speeds from 50 to 30 kilometers an hour on all residential streets. I think that's what he was talking to. I was thinking about that in the context of this meeting, so I went on to our friendly AI and put a question in. I asked, what are the pros and cons of reducing traffic speeds from 50 to 30 kilometers an hour on residential streets on a small Vancouver Island community, which I defined as being approximately 10,000 people? And it came back, as you know, very quickly. And there were 10 pros and there were 10 cons. So, you know, you expect that. But there were a couple I think just are worth noting. A lot of people think this is, on the surface, a good idea. But clearly, at this point out, there are enforcement challenges. Noting also that lower speed limits require consistent enforcement to be effective. It presents driver compliance issues, and some drivers may just simply ignore signs. So that's that, and I'll include that one in my little package if I may. What I just would on this side is I understand if you contemplate this having the lower speeds in existing residential areas, this will involve a lot of signage. Disregarding the cost of that signage, which is fairly significant, I think it was pointed out, the former engineer, director of engineering here, and our traffic consultant, Mr. Druell, have consistently said that signs don't work. Now, I think stop signs are an exception to that, but they say a lot of people, the people that are causing the problems, many of them ignore signs. So if you're going to look at this, so the real thing, and I wish all of the councillors were here, is if we get to that point, to considering that as a council decision to do this, I'd like to suggest that 30 days before that is a vote on to doing that each councillor should take a pledge that for the next 30 days, they will drive at 30 miles an hour and see how it goes. And then they will be informed when they make their decision on whether this is a good idea. So that's just that. Thank you.
Fair point. I'd also point out, too, because there are some jurisdictions on Vancouver Island who are starting their trials in the last couple of years, we will probably have some real-world data in a year or two where I know not every community is doing the signage blitz. So then the question will be, if you issue a ticket, is it still something that you can enforce? Because I know, talking to the staff sergeant, that was one of the concerns he had, is that if you don't have the signage in a location that's readily visible, say on a residential street, and they give a ticket, but the Motor Vehicle Act says it's 50 on all residential streets in BC, is that person within their rights? If you just have a sign at the edge of town, by the way, it's 30 on residential streets, and they say, well, I didn't see it. I don't know where that would land in the courts. So that was one issue. But to your point, too, about the pros, there is a huge reduction in the severity of injury. So the World Health Organization has data going back like a decade where it shows an S-curve from about 25 kilometers up to about 55. And so 30 is right at the start of that S-curve, so it significantly reduces the number of fatalities. But it is slower, and to your point, we should probably drive at 30 for a few days if we're going to vote in favor of that. But I do appreciate Mr. Provost first, and then yourself raising that as an issue. I think it's a fair issue to raise, particularly when we have a very old demographic. And I know for my parents, my mom isn't driving, my dad drives very little, and his reflexes are not what they used to be, as he's around age 80. So it's a fair point that a slower speed means more time to react if there's something in front of you, like a deer or a car. Any questions from members? Oh, Councillor Vandervalk, my apologies.
It's not a question, but more a comment. I think, I don't know that it's the older people that necessarily are the ones that are speeding. And my take on it would be that if people are going to be speeding, that I agree that the signs won't make a big difference. I think people that are speeding are going to speed regardless of what things we try and put in place. I think 30 kilometers per hour is pretty slow, and it would be a real test of everybody to be driving 30 kilometers an hour all the time. I think we have enough problems trying to get people to slow down to 30K through the school zones, so trying to enforce it throughout the whole town. I think the intent of trying to slow down traffic is good. I just don't know that I think that that's the solution to the problem.
Fair point. Anything else from staff? No? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to come to the microphone? Okay. Seeing no one, just one more time, last chance. Okay. With that, then I guess a motion to adjourn would be in order, unless there's anything extra from any other member of council? No? Councillor Vandervalk, Councillor Young, all in favor? The committee of the whole is adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.